Thank you all. It is great to be here in Colorado. It is great to be here to support these two young men who are doing such a fantastic job for our community and for our nation. I'd like to chat with you a little bit about the civil rights movement over the last 50 years. This is the 50th anniversary of the passage of the first modern Civil Rights Acts, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now, before I start talking about it, let me just tell you a little bit about me and where I was at that time in my life, so that you know that I was a grown man when that was taking place. In 1959, I started my career in law and politics. I was a grown-up man of 15 years old, and I made the decision one spring day to go to the public library in St. Landry Parish, Louisiana. The public library was not open to black folk at that time and in that place. Still, knowing that I might get into some difficulty, I put a typewriter pad in my pants and one in my shirt in case I might take some blows. I visited the school's athletic department and borrowed some catchers, you know, the knee pads and shin pads that catchers wear. I put a couple of those on, and some other little pads and things, and dressed quite appropriately and went down to the public library and said, I filled out my little card. You know, they had the Dewey Decimal System or whatever it was called. I filled out the card and I brought it, I was ready. And I handed it to the lady and said, good afternoon, good morning, may I have this book, please? And she said, oh, no, this is the way that what you do is you give this to your school librarian, segregated school at this time. This is 1959, Louisiana. Give this to your school librarian, and she'll call me and order the book, and I will send the book to her library, and then you can go to the school library and pick it up. I said, I understand, and I appreciate that, but I want to, as a citizen of St. Landry Parish, I want to get my book from the public library. She said, well, you better get out of here. So there were no books. I was going to just sit and read a book. There were no books immediately available, but there was a table with some magazines on it. I went over to that table and sat, opened up the magazine and started reading. I don't remember what magazine it was because I was just flipping pages, waiting for the next step. And before long, the two police officers came and called me on to get out of that place. And they took me to another appropriate place that was not the public library. That's how I got started in this business. A couple of years later, that was when I was 15. I graduated from high school when I was 16, went to Southern University, and at 17 became the all-time youngest editor-in-chief of that university's newspaper. At 18, I was expelled. Expelled for writing illegal and radical things like, if I fight your wars and pay your taxes, America, I'm not going to walk around to the back door of the courthouse. And so I was sent packing. The fact that I called a United States Senator from Louisiana a lunatic in very large print was probably the last nail in my coffin, but it was great fun. It was what a young man at that time should have been doing, and I have no problem with the university nor anyone else. We were all acting out our parts. That's what was happening in my life in the lead up to the first civil rights laws. Now, let's talk about what really happened. A few weeks ago, the president was on television and talking about this 50th anniversary, and they were at the President Lyndon Johnson's library and making a big production of what they did. But the story that they told was not the way it happened. I was there. I'll tell you what really happened. Back a couple of clicks to 1957. In 1957, three fellows sat in the White House and talked about civil rights in America and what was needed. And they crafted the first civil rights law in American modern history. Those three fellows were President Dwight David Eisenhower, Vice President Richard Milhouse Nixon, and a young preacher named Martin Luther King Jr. Those three Republicans worked out the first Civil Rights Act in 1957. They presented it. It was filibustered to death by the Democrats. Time passed, and so we needed to work out. Things got worse. I mean, in 57, things were bad. By the mid-60s, America was in great difficulty. We were fighting a war in Vietnam. We were fighting a battle in our own streets. People were being brutalized, hit. I have scars on my body of a police dog bite right on this right hip. That dog taught me how to run. I would never again, even to this day, I would never be that slow. I was able to, just a couple of years after that, run a 40-yard dash in 4.37 seconds, which was very, very respectable time, very respectable time. And some other scars from those. That's why I put that stuff in my pants when I was going down to the public library, because folks were getting hit kind of hard in those times. Well, that's what was happening. We were living in two different worlds, black world and a white world. We had black toilets and white toilets, black water fountains and white water fountains, black entryways into buildings, usually in the back, and white entryways. Very different worlds that we lived in. Our schools were black, our teachers were black, our churches were black, our preachers were black. The Supreme Court at some point said that we needed to do something different, particularly with respect to schools. And so the second wave of civil rights acts came, and that came in 1963 and 1964 as they worked on the 64 Civil Rights Act and then the 65 Civil Rights Act. Those acts passed. I want to give you because I have the vote right here. 64 Civil Rights Act. Senate Democrats voted 2/3 for it and 1/3 against. 4 out of every 5 Republicans voted for the Civil Rights Act. In the House of Representatives, again, more than 4 out of every 5 Republicans voted for the Civil Rights Act. 1/3 of the Democrats voted against. Almost every Southern Democrat voted against those, voted no, including a fellow named Al Gore from Tennessee. That's how the vote went. And that was the true story of how those Civil Rights Acts came into existence. So what's happened during the last 50 years? Is America better off or not? Is the black community better off or not? That's the question that we face today. And as I see it, I must tell you, we're not better off, neither as a community nor as a nation. Our nation today is almost as divided as it was in the 1960s. Our schools, well, let's take a look. How far have we come with respect to justice? Our president said some time ago when Trayvon Martin was killed that he demanded justice for Trayvon because Trayvon looked like his sons would look if he had sons. And when 200 young women were kidnapped in Nigeria, his partner said, "We've got to do something about this kidnapping in Nigeria because those girls look like my daughters." In both situations, what they were saying to us is that justice is important because the color of the persons involved, the colors of their skin, was paramount. If a white president had said, "We've got to go to Bosnia and fight because the people over there look just like my children," this nation would have been up in arms. We would have been rattling our sabers, and Jesse and the other folks like Jesse would have been marching on the White House. We would not have accepted that. But as Americans, we let the Obamas say that kind of thing and get away with it. I lived in a society where justice was not colorblind. It didn't work. It did not work for any of us. It certainly did not work for me and people who looked like me. I won't ever live in this nation or any other nation where the color of someone dictates what justice will be. So when it comes to justice, we haven't moved very far. Incidentally, contrast that to Christopher Lane. A lot of people don't know Christopher Lane. He was the young Australian student who was killed, and the president never said, now Christopher Lane, he looks like my sons. I have sons. He's a little paler than my sons, but he has 2 legs and 2 arms and a heart and a spirit like my sons. And the president didn't demand justice for the killing of that young man. That's the wrong way to do this. When it comes to justice, we have not come far enough. And if we have, we're going backwards. So it doesn't matter. Where we are today is not where we need to be.